The city was a symphony of jarring notes, the roar of engines, the distant wail of sirens, the impatient clamor of a million hurried lives. For Rayan, it was the only orchestra he'd ever known. Barely a man at 17, with eyes that held an old soul's quiet observation, he navigated the indifferent streets. His clothes were worn, his stomach often empty, but his spirit possessed a peculiar resilience. Few ever noticed him, another shadow in the urban sprawl. Yet, in the quiet moments, away from the relentless human tide, Rayan harbored a secret. He could see the subtle energies that ebbed and flowed in living things, a drooping flower on a market stall that, with a gentle touch and a whispered word, would slowly perk up, a stray cat with a limping paw that, after a few days of his patient attention, would bound away, healed. These were small, unnoticed kindnesses, fragments of an ability he didn't understand, but accepted as part of himself. He never asked for anything in return. The act of mending was its own reward. In stark contrast to Rayan's world of shadowed alleyways and borrowed warmth stood the imposing edifice of Finch Tower, a steel and glass monument to the vast fortune of Mr. Alistair Finch. Finch was a man who commanded boardrooms and moved markets with a single phone call. Power radiated from him like a force field. Yet, within the opulent silence of his penthouse apartment, this power dissolved into a gnawing, helpless despair. His only daughter, Lily, was the center of his universe, and for 3 agonizing years, she hadn't walked. A rare, debilitating condition, the doctors called it, emerging insidiously after a childhood illness. One specialist after another, including the renowned Dr. Corbin Vance with his Savile Row suits and reassuringly expensive consultations, had offered theories, treatments, and ultimately hushed condolences for her unchanging state. Each failed attempt chipped away another piece of Alistair Finch's formidable resolve, leaving him a hollow man in a gilded cage. Dr. Vance, ever present, continued to prescribe complex regimens, experimental drugs, and physiotherapy sessions that yielded nothing but mounting bills and deeper frustration. One blustery afternoon, Mr. Finch was leaving a somber consultation at a private clinic, his face a mask of weary resignation. Dr. Vance walked beside him, his voice a smooth baritone of professional sympathy, already outlining another costly avenue of potential exploration. As Finch paused by his limousine, his shoulders slumped, the picture of a defeated king, he muttered, more to himself than anyone, "I'd give anything. Anything at all." It was then that Rayan, who had been seeking shelter from the biting wind in a nearby doorway, saw him. He didn't see the millionaire. He saw the raw pain etched on the man's face, an aura of suffering that was almost palpable. He'd seen Lily once, a fleeting glimpse through a guarded gate, a pale girl in a wheelchair, her eyes holding a universe of unspoken longing. Something stirred within him, a familiar compassionate impulse, but stronger this time, more urgent. Before he could guess the audacity of it, Rayan stepped forward, his small, threadbare frame almost swallowed by the grandeur of the scene. He moved directly into Mr. Finch's path, his gaze surprisingly steady. "Sir." Rayan's voice was clear, though not loud, cutting through the city's hum and Dr. Vance's smooth reassurances. Mr. Finch, startled from his bleak reverie, looked down at the boy. His eyes, accustomed to appraising assets worth millions, swept over Rayan with cold dismissal. Dr. Vance arched a perfectly sculpted eyebrow, a silent question of annoyance in his eyes. "Sir," Rayan repeated, his gaze unwavering, locking onto the millionaires. I can make your daughter walk again. The words hung in the air, stark and unbelievable. Alistair Finch froze. The blood drained from his face, then rushed back in a wave of disbelief and a rising tide of indignation. The city noise, the wind, Dr. Vance's impatient sigh, everything seemed to recede. For a long moment, the titan of industry was utterly motionless, his mind struggling to process the sheer, impossible nerve of the beggar boy standing before him. His first instinct was to lash out, to call security, to dismiss this absurdity with the contempt it deserved. But behind the outrage, something else flickered the faintest, most desperate spark of a pain so profound it would grasp at any straw, no matter how unbelievable. He simply stared, the world tilting on its axis. The silence stretched, taut and electric. Dr. Corbin Vance was the first to break it, a short, derisive laugh escaping his lips. "Really, Alistair," he said, his tone dripping with condescension as he gestured dismissively at Rayan. "Must we entertain every street urchin with a wild claim? This is preposterous. The boy is clearly delusional or looking for a handout." Mr. Finch's eyes, hard and assessing, remained fixed on Rayan. The initial shock was wearing off, replaced by a familiar cynicism. Yet the boy didn't flinch. There was no sign of deceit in his earnest gaze, only a quiet, unnerving certainty. Alistair Finch had built an empire on reading people, on spotting the subtle tells of a bluff. He saw none here. What he saw was something else. "And how, young man?" Mr. Finch finally spoke, his voice dangerously soft. "Do you propose to achieve this miracle that has eluded the world's leading medical experts?" "I don't know their ways, sir," Rayan replied simply. "I just know what I can do. Sometimes things just need help to remember how to be whole." Dr. Vance scoffed openly. "Poetic nonsense. Alistair, this is a waste of your valuable time. We have serious matters to discuss, actual medical strategies." He took a step forward, as if to physically shepherd Mr. Finch away. But Alistair Finch didn't move. The doctor's immediate, almost aggressive dismissal, coupled with Rayan's calm persistence, created an unexpected pause in his mind. Desperation, a corrosive acid, had eaten away at his skepticism far more than he cared to admit. What if? The question, however faint, was there. He'd spent millions, consulted dozens. What was one more, however unorthodox? "What do you want, boy?" Finch asked, his voice still laced with suspicion. "Money." Rayan shook his head. "No, sir. Just a chance to help her." Mr. Finch's office, on the top floor of Finch Tower, was a testament to his wealth and power, vast, minimalist, with a view that encompassed the entire city. A single, exquisitely unhealthy-looking bonsai tree sat on a low table, its leaves yellowed and drooping, a recent acquisition that had failed to thrive despite the meticulous care instructions. Finch had been meaning to have it replaced. As if sensing the internal debate raging within the millionaire, Rayan's gaze drifted to the bonsai. "That tree is sad," he said quietly, not to Mr. Finch, but as if speaking to the plant itself. Before anyone could react, he took a step towards it. Dr. Vance tensed, ready to intervene, but Finch raised a hand, his curiosity momentarily overriding his caution. Rayan knelt by the bonsai. He didn't touch it at first, just looked at it intently. Then he reached out a slender hand, his fingers gently brushing the withered leaves, then resting lightly on the gnarled trunk. He closed his eyes. No incantations, no dramatic gestures. Just a profound stillness. Minutes passed. Mr. Finch watched, a strange feeling churning within him. Dr. Vance tapped his foot impatiently, his expression one of barely concealed disgust. Then, almost imperceptibly at first, a change. A subtle shift in the dull green of the leaves. One or two seemed to unfurl slightly to lift. Rayan opened his eyes and stepped back. He offered no explanation. Mr. Finch stared at the bonsai. It was different. It looked less burdened, a touch more vibrant. He couldn't explain it. Coincidence. Auto-suggestion. He didn't know. But it was enough. What Mr. Finch didn't realize was, this small, quiet act wasn't a trick. It was a genuine manifestation of Rayan's ability to perceive and interact with the vital essence of living things, an intuitive recalibration of their natural balance. "Dessert, Vance," Finch said, his voice now firm, cutting through the doctor's impending protest. "Perhaps you should wait outside." Vance looked aghast, sputtering, but a glacial look from Finch silenced him, and he retreated, his face a mask of fury and indignation. Alone with Rayan, Finch felt a maelstrom of conflicting emotions. "My daughter, Lily, her condition is complex. The finest doctors. Doctors see the body, sir," Rayan said, his gaze meeting Finch's. "Sometimes the spirit needs healing first, for the body to follow." Alistair Finch made a decision then, one that every rational bone in his body screamed against. It was a gamble born not of logic, but of a father's unyielding love and a despair that had reached its absolute limit. "All right, boy," he said, the words feeling heavy and momentous. "You will have your chance. You will come to my home. You will see my daughter. But understand this, you will be watched. Every moment. And if this is some kind of cruel trick, if you cause her even a moment's more distress." He left the threat hanging, unspoken but potent. Rayan simply nodded, his expression serene. "Thank you, sir." Later that day, as Rayan was quietly escorted into the Finch mansion, a world away from the grime of the streets, he knew Lily Finch, in her sterile, beautifully appointed room, overheard hushed, anxious voices. Her mother had passed years ago, and her father, despite his love, was often a distant figure, consumed by work and the desperate search for her cure. She heard snippets. Some boy. A preposterous idea. Father's lost his mind. But then, a phrase caught her ear, spoken by Mrs. Hayes, the kind, elderly housekeeper, to another staff member. "He says he can help Miss Lily walk." Hope, a fragile, almost forgotten butterfly, dared to flutter its wings in Lily's heart. The Finch mansion was a labyrinth of polished marble, hushed corridors, and rooms filled with priceless art. For Rayan, it felt like stepping onto another planet. He was given simple, clean clothes and a small, Spartan room in a quiet wing, far from the family's main living quarters. Mrs. Eleanor Hayes, the housekeeper with kind eyes and a gentle smile, was tasked with overseeing his basic needs. She treated him with a quiet dignity that was a welcome contrast to the suspicious glares of other staff members and the palpable hostility that radiated from Dr. Corbin Vance whenever their paths crossed. Rayan's first meeting with Lily was in her sun-drenched sitting room, a space filled with books and art supplies, yet dominated by the gleaming, high-tech wheelchair and an array of medical equipment that served as constant reminders of her confinement. Lily was pale and slender, her large, intelligent eyes holding a mixture of curiosity, fragility, and a deep, weary skepticism that mirrored her father's. Dr. Vance was present, of course, positioned like a hawk, his arms crossed, his expression a study in medical disapproval. Mr. Finch stood by the window, his face unreadable. Rayan didn't approach Lily immediately. He simply stood quietly for a moment, his gaze soft, taking in the atmosphere of the room and Lily herself. He offered her a small, almost shy smile. "Hello, Lily," he said, his voice calm. His methods, when they began, were startling in their simplicity. There were no machines, no injections, no complex medical jargon. He'd often start by just talking to Lily, asking her about her dreams, her favorite stories, the colors she liked. He'd bring her small, carefully chosen things from the mansion's gardens, a perfectly formed leaf, a fragrant flower, a smooth, cool stone, and encourage her to truly feel them, to describe their textures, their scents. He'd guide her through gentle breathing exercises, teaching her to visualize energy flowing through her body, picturing pathways of light awakening her dormant limbs. Sometimes he would lightly touch her legs, his hands radiating a gentle warmth, his focus absolute. It was never invasive, always respectful. Lily, initially reserved and wary, found herself slowly unclenching. Rayan's presence was calming, his belief in her potential unwavering. It was a stark contrast to Dr. Vance's clinical pronouncements and the pitying glances she often received. Within a week, small changes began. A persistent tingling in Lily's toes, where there had been numbness for years. A dream where she was running, so vivid she woke with the phantom sensation of muscles aching. One afternoon, while Rayan was guiding her through a visualization, she gasped. "I felt that," she whispered, her eyes wide. A flicker. In my calf, Mr. Finch, who observed these sessions from a distance, often unseen, felt a cautious, almost painful hope begin to bloom. He saw a lightness in Lily's eyes he hadn't seen in years. Dr. Vance, however, saw something else entirely, a threat. His carefully constructed world of medical authority, his lucrative relationship with the Finch family, his professional reputation, all were being challenged by a penniless nobody with parlor tricks. "This is the placebo effect, Alistair, nothing more," he'd insist to Mr. Finch in private. "Suggestibility. She wants to believe it, so she imagines these things. There's no physiological basis for any of this. In fact," he'd add, his voice laced with concern, "I'm worried this distraction is preventing her from focusing on the proven therapies that, given time, will yield results." Behind the scenes, a different plan was unfolding, orchestrated by Vance. He began to subtly manipulate situations. If Lily reported a good day with Rayan, Vance, during his own examination later, would find concerning signs of muscle fatigue or nerve stress. He'd suggest that Rayan's untrained manipulations were causing micro damage. He spoke to influential friends of the Finch family, sowing seeds of doubt about Alistair's judgment in allowing such a charade. He even tried to intimidate Mrs. Hayes, suggesting that her overly sympathetic attitude towards the boy might be misconstrued. Mrs. Hayes, however, was not easily swayed. She had worked for the Finch family for decades, had cared for Lily since she was a baby. She'd seen the parade of specialists, the expensive treatments, the dwindling hope, and now she saw Lily smiling genuinely. She saw the subtle but undeniable spark of life returning to the girl's eyes after her sessions with Rayan. She also saw the almost predatory gleam in Dr. Vance's eyes when he spoke of the boy, the way his professional concern seemed a little too polished, his dismissals a little too vehement. Her own quiet observations began to form a pattern of suspicion in her mind. One evening, after a particularly encouraging session where Lily had managed, with Rayan's gentle support, to shift her legs a few inches on her own. Dr. Vance swept in for his assessment. He conducted a series of tests, his touch more brusque than usual. His pronouncement was grim. "I'm detecting increased spasticity and a worrying lack of controlled response. As I feared, these unregulated methods are potentially exacerbating underlying issues. We may need to consider more invasive diagnostic procedures to assess the damage." Lily's face fell, the light in her eyes dimming. Rayan, standing quietly by, felt a surge of frustration, but kept his composure. Mr. Finch, caught between his daughter's fragile hope and the doctor's dire warnings, felt the familiar vise of despair begin to tighten once more. The whispers and resistance were growing louder, threatening to drown out the faint melody of progress. The battle for Lily's future intensified. Each small victory she achieved with Rayan, a stronger sensation, a more deliberate movement, a brighter outlook, was met by Dr. Vance with increasingly ominous pronouncements and veiled accusations. He spoke of neurological inflammation, muscular irregularities, and the dangers of unqualified interference, his words meticulously chosen to instill fear and doubt in Mr. Finch. He subtly suggested that Rayan, desperate for recognition, might be exaggerating Lily's improvements or even coaching her on what to say. Lily, however, was no longer a passive observer in her own recovery. The flicker of hope Rayan had ignited had grown into a steady flame of determination. She started to recall details about Dr. Vance's long tenure as her primary physician, his quick dismissal of any alternative therapies she or her father had tentatively suggested in the past, the way he always steered conversations back to his own expensive, ongoing treatment plans, the subtle but persistent discouragement whenever she'd shown any signs of natural improvement prior to Rayan's arrival. "He told me once, a long time ago, that I should just accept my condition," Lily confided in Rayan and a concerned Mrs. Hayes one afternoon. That fighting it was pointless and would only lead to disappointment. This admission struck a chord with Mrs. Hayes. She remembered Dr. Vance's early days with the family, his initial confidence bordering on arrogance. She also recalled hushed arguments between him and other specialists who had offered different opinions Vance had expertly discredited. What Dr. Vance didn't realize was, Mrs. Hayes mused to herself, some of us have long memories, and not all of us are easily fooled by a smooth tongue and a medical degree. Driven by a protective instinct for Lily and a growing unease about Dr. Vance, Mrs. Hayes began her own quiet investigation. She had access to parts of the house others didn't, including old storage rooms where outdated household records were kept. She remembered seeing boxes of old medical bills and correspondence. With painstaking care, she started sifting through them during her off hours. Meanwhile, Rayan, while continuing his work with Lily, felt the pressure mounting. He knew Dr. Vance was actively working against him. One day, a valuable silver letter opener went missing from Mr. Finch's study, a room Rayan had briefly entered to fetch a book for Lily. Dr. Vance, with feigned reluctance, made sure to highlight this coincidence to Mr. Finch, planting the seed that the street boy might not be entirely trustworthy. But Lily's progress was becoming undeniable. She could now sit unsupported for several minutes and, with Rayan's aid, stand while gripping parallel bars he had helped install in her room. The vibrancy in her complexion, the clarity in her eyes, these were things no one could dispute. This visible improvement, ironically, made Dr. Vance more desperate. He knew his time could be running out. He escalated his campaign, suggesting to Mr. Finch that Rayan might be using some unknown, potentially harmful stimulant to achieve these superficial results, and that a full, invasive medical workup was needed immediately to ascertain the true state of Lily's health, implying any positive changes were illusory or dangerous. It was Mrs. Hayes who found the first piece of concrete evidence. Tucked away in an old file of Lily's early medical history, misfiled under household expenses, was a consultation report from a renowned neurologist Dr. Vance had supposedly conferred with years ago. The report offered a far more optimistic prognosis than Vance had ever conveyed to Mr. Finch, suggesting a specific, less invasive, and significantly cheaper course of rehabilitation that had never been pursued. Attached was a scribbled note in Vance's handwriting, potentially problematic for long-term care model. File NFA no further action. Her heart pounding, Mrs. Hayes showed the document to Rayan. He didn't fully understand the medical terms, but he understood betrayal. Together, they decided they had to show Mr. Finch. Mr. Finch, already wrestling with his own observations of Lily's genuine improvement versus Dr. Vance's increasingly frantic warnings, received this new information with a grim quietness. The missing letter opener incident, which he had initially dismissed, now felt like a clumsy attempt at misdirection. The note from Vance was a chilling indication of something far more sinister than mere incompetence. The trust he had placed in Dr. Vance for years began to crumble. What Dr. Vance didn't realize was his own elaborate deceptions and desperate attempts to frame Rayan were now unraveling, leading directly back to him. Alistair Finch, a man who dealt with corporate espionage and high-stakes betrayals as a matter of course, was not someone to be trifled with when his family was threatened. He thanked Mrs. Hayes and Rayan, his face like stone, and immediately set his own discreet, powerful resources into motion. He hired private investigators, the best in the business, to delve into every aspect of Dr. Corbin Vance's professional and financial history, particularly concerning his treatment of Lily Finch. The truth, however ugly, was about to be unveiled. The air in Mr. Finch's grand study crackled with unspoken tension. Alistair Finch sat behind his mahogany desk, his expression unreadable, though a keen observer might have noticed the tightening around his jaw. Dr. Corbin Vance, summoned for an urgent case review, sat opposite him, exuding an air of composed professionalism that was beginning to look frayed at the edges. Rayan stood quietly near the window, a silent observer, while Mrs. Hayes was present at Mr. Finch's request, a subtle nod to her role in the unfolding drama. Lily was not present, at her father's insistence. He wanted to shield her from this initial confrontation. Dr. Vance, Mr. Finch began, his voice dangerously calm. We need to discuss Lily's progress, or rather, the discrepancies in your assessment of it. Vance launched into his prepared speech, a carefully woven tapestry of medical jargon, feigned concern, and subtle insinuations about the unorthodox and potentially harmful influence of Rayan. He spoke of the need for new, expensive scans to truly understand the underlying damage he suspected Rayan's methods were causing. He even produced a newly fabricated report detailing supposed neural stress indicators. My primary concern, Alistair, Vance concluded, his voice oozing sincerity, is Lily's long-term well-being, which I fear is being compromised by this experiment. Mr. Finch listened patiently, his eyes never leaving Vance's face. When the doctor finished, Finch leaned forward. "Your concern is touching, Corbin. However, my own team has been conducting a review." He slid a slim file across the desk. "This, for instance. A consultation report from Dr. Alistair Carmichael, dated 3 years ago. A report you assured me was inconclusive, but which, in fact, outlined a very specific, hopeful prognosis and a treatment path quite different from yours. A path you marked no further action, because it was, and I quote your annotation, problematic for long-term care model." Dr. Vance's composure visibly cracked. A flush crept up his neck. "That's taken out of context. Old notes. And these," Finch continued, his voice hardening, adding another set of papers to the pile, "are financial records. Records showing a pattern of inflated billing, unnecessary procedures, and direct financial benefits to you from specific pharmaceutical companies whose experimental drugs you aggressively pushed for Lily, despite their proven inefficacy and significant side effects." The private investigators had been thorough. Vance stood abruptly, his face pale. "This is an outrage, slander!" "My reputation. Your reputation, Doctor." Finch cut him off, his voice like ice, is precisely what is at stake. Or rather, what is left of it. It was at that precise, supercharged moment that the door to the study opened, not with a timid knock, but with a gentle, deliberate push. Lily Finch stood in the doorway. Not leaning on crutches, not supported by a frame. She stood, alone. Her legs, though trembling slightly from the effort, were undeniably bearing her weight. A radiant, triumphant smile lit up her face as her eyes met Rayan's, then her father's. Dr. Vance stared, his jaw slack, all pretense of composure gone. He looked as though he'd seen a ghost. Mr. Finch's breath hitched, tears welling in his eyes as he rose slowly, his gaze locked on his daughter. Mrs. Hayes gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Then Lily took a step, and another, hesitant, wobbly, but undeniably steps. United, she walked towards her father, her eyes shining. "Daddy," she said, her voice clear and strong. "Rayan didn't just help me walk. He helped me believe I could." This was the ultimate vindication, more powerful than any document, any investigator's report. The living, breathing proof of Rayan's gift and Dr. Vance's deceit. The confrontation that followed was swift and decisive, faced with irrefutable evidence of his malpractice, financial fraud, and Lily's undeniable recovery. Dr. Corbin Vance crumbled. He was dismissed on the spot, his medical license subsequently revoked, and he faced a barrage of legal actions that would dismantle his carefully constructed career. The news sent ripples through the medical community, a cautionary tale of arrogance and greed. Rayan, in the aftermath, was quiet and unassuming as ever. Mr. Finch, his heart overflowing with a gratitude too profound for words, offered him anything: a fortune, an education, a new life. "Name it, Rayan," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Anything you desire." Rayan looked at Lily, now taking confident strides around the room, her laughter echoing like music. He then turned back to Mr. Finch. "Sir," he said gently, "there are many Lilies in the world. Children who have been told there is no hope, whose families cannot afford the help they need. If you truly wish to thank me, help them." And so, Alistair Finch, a man once defined by balance sheets and stock prices, found a new purpose. He established the Lily's Light Foundation, a pioneering center dedicated to holistic and accessible healing for children with debilitating conditions. It wasn't about rejecting conventional medicine, but integrating it with compassionate, intuitive approaches like Rayan's. Rayan, while shying away from the limelight, became a guiding spirit for the foundation, ensuring its principles remained true to helping the whole child body, mind, and spirit. Lily, vibrant and active, became its most passionate advocate, her own story a beacon of hope. The mansion, once a place of hushed despair, now often echoed with the laughter of children finding their own paths to healing. And so, Ryan's journey from a forgotten beggar boy on the city streets to a quiet catalyst for profound change serves as a powerful reminder that true worth is not measured by status or wealth, and that hope can be found in the most unexpected of places, often through the simplest acts of kindness and belief. The most powerful healing often begins when one person truly sees the potential in another. If this story of resilience, hidden talent, and the fight for justice stirred something in you, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Give this video a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring narratives about people who turned adversity into triumph. What was the most impactful moment for you?